And welcome back to the Hot Lap. Welcome also to our F1 2025 preview. We'll be talking about the drivers, we'll be talking about the calendar, tiny bits of news, but ultimately where we think who will finish where, what teams have done well in testing and going forward. Is Red Bull going to have another brilliant season? And Max Verstappen, well, to be fair, they had a good season last year, an even better season in 2023. And I wanted to say a lot more. But first, let's get into the Formula One calendar, shall we? This is the F1 calendar. And as you can see, we've already had F1 75. That's been done and dusted, as well as the pre-season test, where we kind of guessed that McLaren was looking good. But more on that a bit later. So we start, unusually, for the last few years, in Australia. The last time we were going to start in Australia, I believe, was all the way in 2020. Yeah, that didn't quite happen for obvious reasons. And I'm excited. I've always thought Australia should be the start of the season. As much as I like Bahrain, nah, definitely should be Australia. So we'll be starting down under. They say Melbourne, a great place for a race. It's going to be Oscar Piastri and Jack Doohan's home Grand Prix. Yeah, more than Doohan in a bit as well. So after Australia, we go to round 2 China. Yes, which is a sprint. And after China, I'm still getting used to this. Not the fact that we're back in China. I like the track. It can make for entertaining races. Number 3, Japan. This is the weird one. Japan, 3rd. This is a race that used to be at the end of the season deciding championships. Bahrain round 4, Saudi Arabia round 5. They've been pushed back because of religious holidays. Round 6 is Miami, our first trip to America. Round 7 is the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in Imola. Is this going to be the last time we ever have a race in Imola? Could be, it could be. But next up, Monaco. Yes, Monaco, where it appears the drivers are going to be forced to stop twice. Round 9 in Spain, round 10 Canada. I do like Canada. Then round 11 in Austria, round 12, one of my favourite tracks in Silverstone. Then we go to round 13 in Belgium. Round 14 is Hungary. Then we have our mandatory 4-week summer school holiday-esque break and end up in the Netherlands, which could be, I think, is it this year or next year? Could be the last race for the Dutch Grand Prix, which is really sad. Is it all about money? Money talks for Liberty, doesn't it? Sadly, but I can understand to a point. Italy, yeah, I'm sad about. I really like the Dutch Grand Prix. Then we've got Monza, Italy. What is Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc going to do there? It's going to be great. Baku is next in Azerbaijan, round 17. Round 18 is Singapore. Round 19 is the USA in Austin, the only proper F1 track we go to in America. Next up is Mexico, but no Sergio Perez. What's it going to be like there? For the first time since we've had the Mexican Grand Prix combat, there is no Sergio. Round 21 is Brazil. Round 22 is Las Vegas. And then the final 2 rounds are Qatar and the Abu Dhabi. Yeah, why? End it in Brazil. Come on, end it in Brazil. Abu Dhabi is such a beautiful track. But such a soulless track, I think, as well. These are the sprint races. We kind of mentioned China, which is the second race of the season. Round 2 is a sprint race. Then the Miami. They had to do something to try and make it more exciting, didn't they? So we've got Miami, the second sprint race. They, once again, only have 6. Belgium, the next one. Yeah, and we had that a couple of years ago. It worked okay. I still want the Silverstone one. I know it wasn't the greatest of sprint races, but it set up an absolutely fantastic Grand Prix the next day, didn't it? If you were a Lewis Hamilton fan, that is. Not so much if you're Max. USA, Austin, sprint race. Yeah, great. Brazil should always have a sprint race. It should always. And Qatar, yeah, which wasn't a half-decent sprint race as well. It wasn't too bad, I must say. So, moving on then for our 6 sprint races. These are, apparently these are the power rankings for the British Grand Prix, but we don't need them, do we? But we do need this. Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz. This was a nice moment in testing. The biggest story of last year, also one of the biggest stories coming into this year. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari, taking Carlos Sainz's seat. Yeah, I get it. It's very upsetting for Carlos Sainz, I imagine, but he's looking not too bad at Williams. But Lewis Hamilton, all smiles, isn't he? I'm really looking forward to how these two do. I think these two will do particularly well. But it's nice those two sharing a moment. I imagine is Carlos giving Hamilton any tips on how to beat Sainz, because he did it a fair amount of times. Yes, Leclerc probably has Charles Leclerc, not Carlos Sainz. What am I saying? And last but not least, I thought this was quite interesting in relation to the pecking order. This is the one, the only Andrea Stella saying we've always talked about the top 4 recently, but we need to adapt our language again this year. That would be the top 5 or 6. I think that's quite interesting what he says there. Is Williams? People were talking. Have Williams joined the top 6, the top 5 even? Don't know. But one thing is for sure: Williams getting my bottle. Williams were fastest in testing. Now, speaking about Williams, that's one of the last teams we'll be talking about, because we are going to be talking about the drivers and the teams in alphabetical order, which means I believe it's sort of alphabetical order, but Alpine is first, and the first driver we're going to be talking about is none other than this guy here. This is Jack Doohan, ladies and gentlemen. He's for Alpine, but for how long? Even when you saw the Drive to Survive trailer, I think it kind of skew-whiffed the story a bit. But it's Flavio Briatore going, I own every millimetre or something, or words to that effect, let's say. So much pressure for Jack Doohan going in, and it's his first, Grand Prix in Australia, his first home Grand Prix. He was fairly solid in testing. Yes, he was a bit slower than Gasly, I think, when you look at the data. But still, I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's as bad as everyone says he's going to be. I really don't. I think he'll do all right. I hope he does all right. And this whole Colapinto thing shoved in his face. Yes, it's probably more the media doing that. But it's Alpine that have started it. They set the fire, haven't they, for Jack Doohan? And so I really hope he does good. Imagine getting a podium at your first Australian Grand Prix. Yes, it's very doubtful, but that would be a middle finger, I think, to everyone that wants him gone. Which, if words were to believe, is half the Alpine team. Which I really don't think that's the case. But next up, we've got Gasly, who won the war. What war? He won the war against Esteban Ocon. Yes, Ocon v Gasly. They had that to do at Monaco last year, which looks like it's going to be something on that Drive to Survive show. But Alpine, as a whole, we're looking quite good. People are suggesting, and the people are talking, that it's either Alpine or Williams that are going to be at the head of the midfield pack, which I think's quite interesting. Now, will we know by Australia? Probably not, because Australia's a bit of a weird circuit. Then we go to China. It's going to take, I think, at least 4 or 5 races to really get the established order, because I believe these cars now are so close to each other. They're so close to each other that, temperature. Just think of the Mercedes at Las Vegas. Really, really good. Solid. Dominated. Did George Russell at Las Vegas last year in the Mercedes, for example. And other places, no, absolutely not. And I think it's that close, where temperature and car setup can be massively different. Just a few tenths is going to decide things. Now, one team I think that are going to be disappointed, I was thinking they were looking quite good, is Aston Martin. They were very average, I want to say, in the test, to the point where, we are talking about Williams and Alpine being faster than them, which I appreciate is a bit of a surprise. And it's a surprise to me as well prior to the test. I thought they were doing good. There was lots of good talk coming out of the Aston Martin team, saying this is a brand new car, we're going to do really well, etc., etc. But alas, they are not. Now, if they do really bad, I can't see this being Alonso's last season, simply because he's waiting for Adrian Newey, who's now started at the time of recording. I believe he started on the 1st of March. I imagine he may well have a small impact on this car, but his main concentration is going to be on those 2026 regulations, where they're going to have the new Honda engine as well, which is, I'm not saying it's a risk, but it's going to be interesting. I've always thought it was weird that Aston Martin Honda, but that's next year. So Fernando Alonso, once again, I expect to be the strongest guy in the team. Yes, he's the oldest driver, but he's proving that age is just a number, which is interesting. Age is just a number, but with Lance Stroll, it most certainly is. When his dad runs the team, he is still here, which is a slight surprise. I say slight. Let's be fair. He's going to be there until he wants to go, until he's had enough. Some suggesting that he's forced to be been there. I don't think he is. And there's also been a suggestion that he has tested a rally car. But I think if the car is struggling, we'll see Lance Stroll near the back. There will be a few times when he may outshine Alonso a bit at certain circuits. He kind of did that, I think, a few times last year, but they really are going to be few and far between. So another disappointing season. I'm kind of predicting for Lance Stroll. Now, here we go. One of the first of the big guns is Lewis Hamilton. Is he one of the favourites for the title? I'm saying maybe. He's going to have to beat Charles Leclerc first. Now, what I've said about Lewis is I think in qualifying, Charles Leclerc is going to out-qualify him more often than not. He's going to win the qualifying battle. The big key, I think, for Lewis is, one, how comfortable he is in the car. If he's confident in the car, like we've seen at Mercedes over the years, he will be a very difficult man to beat in the race. And it's the race and his race pace that is absolutely amazing. He's one of the best guys on the tyres, looking after the tyres, and he's very mature now at holding back and knowing when to push. I mean, the amount of times I saw him even last year holding back, I'm thinking, what an average start he's had. And suddenly, he then starts to put in those laps, and we are seeing him then rise above, as in passing all the cars. I mean, he had an absolutely amazing Las Vegas Grand Prix after disastrous qualifying, and that's a race that potentially, I think, had he started on the front row, he would have beaten George Russell. Now, George did beat him soundly last year. Realistically, I think that was a lot more down to qualifying, because quite often Lewis's race pace was faster and better than George, and it's a race pace that Charles Leclerc may well have to be keeping an eye on in respect of his teammate. But in qualifying, I think if they can get that Ferrari right, it's looking good. The only question marks I think that Charles Leclerc is going to have is mistakes. He does make a few silly mistakes, and unlike Carlos Sainz, he's seemingly not as good as Carlos Sainz is as sticking up for himself when Ferrari decide to have some ludicrous strategy call. Yes, they had that at the British Grand Prix, sadly, but I think he's maturing. He's a very good driver. I don't want to say world class. His speed is world class, don't get me wrong, but throughout the course of a season, I believe there are still question marks. He's kind of like, like 5% off being a potential complete legend, let's say. So, yeah, a bit of work for both Lewis and Leclerc. And it's going to be interesting how good that Ferrari is. They're suggesting it's potentially the third fastest car behind McLaren and Mercedes, but potentially ahead of Red Bull, which is quite interesting. Now, it's really difficult to gauge how fast Haas was in the pre-season test, simply because they were happy to do race runs at the back. But if last year's anything to go by, they could be quite solid, and they got better and better, didn't they? They had fairly good. They had some fairly good results, and I believe they don't have Hülkenberg, but they got Esteban Ocon, and they have a new guy as well. And it's going to be really interesting to see how these two guys get on with each other. Now, Esteban Ocon, he's one of the few people, kind of like a Hamilton, like an Alonso, that had to completely scrape everything to get into Formula 1, like Lawson as well, where, he had to absolutely nail every opportunity because he didn't get the same opportunities that some of the other drivers get with rich parents, or parents in the know, so to speak. Looking at you, Lance Stroll. And that's, I think, is why he doesn't get on with his teammates, because he knows he's just so obsessed with beating them and getting every moment. And unfortunately, that has made him quite unpopular with, obviously, the Alpine team. That was like, yeah, see you later, Ocon. But what's going to be interesting is how Ollie Behrman compares to Ocon and handles Esteban Ocon, because he's quite an aggressive teammate. More aggressive than Kimi Antonelli, I'm not sure. Maybe. But if Ollie Behrman does good these next 2 or 3 seasons, surely he's going to be the man to replace Lewis Hamilton when he retires, which is good. Yes, there are still going to be they're still going to be question marks over Ollie Behrman and how fast he is. He did an absolutely amazing, didn't he? Stepping in for Carlos Sainz, and also stepping in, that a couple of, I think it was at one time for he did okay. Was it in Baku, stepping into the Haas as well, didn't he? I apologise if I got that wrong. So yes, there is the potential for him not to do bad at all. Speaking of which, let's get into arguably a lot of people saying the favourite. No, not Max. The favourite being Lando Norris, simply because he is also matured a lot since last. He's got a bit to learn, and he arguably has the best car. And last year, like 23 and 24, but slightly less than 24, he did have the measure of Oscar Piastri, albeit it's Oscar that goes for those aggressive moves and not really Lando Norris. And I'm not saying he needs to be like uber aggressive like Max Verstappen, but he doesn't seem to have the racecraft when fighting in a pack and fighting at close quarters. He doesn't have the ruthlessness of a Max Verstappen, or even like a Fernando Alonso or Lewis Hamilton. And that's something he's going to have to learn, or at least prove going into this year, because unless McLaren have an easy advantage, which I don't think they do, they've got a few tenths, but there's going to be many races when he will be up against other drivers from other teams like a Max Verstappen. And his racecraft is still a question going into 2025, and I think he knows that too, and he's been fairly honest about it. And then one thing Norris is going to have to do is he's going to have to beat Oscar Piastri, who is absolutely world class. Now in 2024 at the beginning I was disappointed. From 2023 he didn't really feel like he improved that much, but then he won that race in Hungary contentiously, let's say, but it was the Baku win that I think solidified how great this guy could be. Yes, McLaren had that DRS ring, wasn't illegal, but against the spirit of the rules, and to be fair, McLaren were paranoid enough that they took it off their car. But it was that absolute lunge that he gave to Charles Leclerc, which is something that I don't think Lando Norris would have done. That's what ended up winning in the race, and then it was the DRS basically that kept him ahead. So I expect big things from Oscar Piastri. Both McLaren drivers, I think, are going to be winning races, just like I think both Ferrari drivers will potentially be winning races as well. But what's interesting is Mercedes. Now, a lot of people are suggesting Mercedes is the second fastest team coming out of pre-season testing. So that is going to be really interesting. And George Russell, yes, when you look to the data, it's so difficult because you don't know who's running what exactly. You don't know the fuel, you don't know the tyres, and roughly you can have a guess at how old they are, when they keep on going round and round, but you don't know how much they're pushing. But there was suggestion that he was faster than Kimi Antonelli. A little bit. But if it is just a little bit, I think Kimi Antonelli is most certainly going to be smiling, but George Russell is the Mercedes team leader. So, is this his best chance to win a World Championship? I'm going to go with yes, if the saying is true and that the Mercedes are indeed the second fastest car overall, then absolutely it's going to be his best chance. The caveat being is that Bahrain testing, and a lot of people are saying this, was very cold. And our cold temperatures, if you remember Silverstone, if you remember Las Vegas, Mercedes like the cold temperatures. But it's going to be a big test. Now, Australia, it's autumnal in Australia, so it's not necessarily too bad. Even China and Japan, it's going to be interesting, though, how much the temperature does affect the Mercedes, because it felt like last year it affected the Mercedes the most compared to any of the other cars. And so I think other than Jack Doohan, I think this guy goes into the season with the most pressure, the second most pressure. Definitely the second most over the rookies, because this is the new Wunderkind. This is Lewis Hamilton's replacement. And now, if you believe all the hype, and let's be fair, the media and everyone, I blame myself as well, love hyping people up. He is going to be the next multiple champion, and that's a lot of pressure to put on someone of Kimi Antonelli's age. He did very average in Formula 2, albeit a lot of people suggested that he did beat Ollie Behrman, but the Prema team could not get their head round the car, and he had a few spectacular races, though. Don't get me wrong about that. He's a very brave, willing to go for it. There's still question marks, so if you remember his crash in practice in Monza, yeah, not particularly great, is it? But Kimi Antonelli, I think potentially, if that Mercedes is the second fastest car at the beginning of the season, depending how many tenths off they are of McLaren, you could even see him winning his first race in the first half of the end. Wouldn't that be something? Now we have the reigning, defending, four-time champion Max Verstappen. This could be his most difficult year yet since 2021. Now 24 was difficult, but you always thought he had it under control in terms of the drivers, and he had a teammate that couldn't really help him, but it didn't matter because he was so dominant at the beginning of the year. Now, at the beginning of this year, there is some suggestion that Red Bull could be behind McLaren, behind Mercedes, behind Ferrari. They could be the 4th fastest team. Having said that, Max Verstappen could make up a few tenths extra. But here's the thing. This is going to be a massive test for Verstappen and Red Bull. Now, if Max Verstappen is not happy, he may well, a lot of people are saying the rumour, go to Aston Martin next year in 2026. Who will he replace her? Well, it really should be Stroll, but we don't know. So this is going to be the biggest test for Max Verstappen. Is he going to rise to the occasion? I'm sure he will. Is this car going to be good enough to fight for the championship? And therein lies the question mark. And a fairly big question mark as well. Will he win races? Oh, I think it's going to be one of the closest years we've got. I've no doubt he will races. How many? I'm not too sure. I'd like him to win, especially if this is going to be the last time we have the Dutch Grand Prix. Go out with a bang, Max, and go for all for that Dutch Grand Prix. But as many question marks as there are potentially on Max from the Red Bull team, I feel there's more on this guy here. I want him to do well. I think he'll do very well. I think he'll do better than Sergio Perez did, to be fair, at Red Bull. But, and this is the thing, but Yuki Tsunoda, the facts are he was faster. But Red Bull obviously saw something that they didn't see in Yuki, which is why they chose Liam Lawson. But the cold, hard data that we had, he was slower. But they chose him. Is it a mental thing? I don't know. He was obviously slightly slower in the test than I think Max Verstappen when you look at the data. But I'm very confident he's going to be better than Sergio Perez. But the sad thing is he going to be the best, the worst of the best teams in terms of you've got 2 Ferrari drivers, you've got 2 very strong McLaren drivers, you've got Verstappen, you've got George Russell, and Kimi Antonelli. And I think a lot of people are maybe unfairly suggesting that it's going to be Liam Lawson at the back of that group. I don't think it will be all the time. Maybe some of the time because he's a rookie. A lot of it's going to be on that Red Bull and how confident he is with that Red Bull. I think it's going to be a tough year for the New Zealander. It's going to be very tough. But speaking of tough years, it's going to be a really tough year for this guy right here, Nico Hülkenberg, arguably in the slowest car for 2025, like it was last year. Audi are going to be crying because they're officially taking over this team next year, and they're going to be like, what have we done? What have we done? So I'm expecting a really, really tough year for Nico Hülkenberg. I doubt he'll get that podium. Hey, wouldn't it be great if he did? And also going to be a tough year for this rookie here. He may well have the toughest year simply because of his car not being particularly good in Gabriele Bortoleto. I most certainly am going to have my fingers crossed for both of them, but I'm not really expecting much at stake, Sauber. I'm sorry. It's not looking particularly good. But to be fair, it's been quite a disappointing pre-season for the V-Cubs. Now, as amazing as they look, does Yuki Tsunoda in his car, and the man that many think should have been that second Red Bull driver rather than Liam Lawson, I think it's going to be very interesting for these two and how they do. Tsunoda, at minimum, he's gonna have to beat his teammate Hadjar, isn't he? He's absolutely gonna have to nail Hadjar if he wants to continue in Formula 1, because it's quite clear that Red Bull don't want him. So where's he going to go? Aston Martin, maybe? Who knows? And Isaac Hadjar, I think he's kind of got nothing to lose at the moment, at least in the first few races. If Yuki Tsunoda beats him by a bit, hey, I'm a rookie. If he beats Yuki Tsunoda, he's beaten a more experienced teammate and goes on from there. Obviously, this guy's very talented. He was, really solid in Formula 2, wasn't he? So it's going to be interesting. Isaac Hadjar in one corner, Yuki Tsunoda in the other. As I said last year, Daniel Ricciardo in one corner, Tsunoda in the other. Only one can win. There'll only be one, and we were right. And sadly, Daniel Ricciardo left after the Singapore Grand Prix. Absolute disgrace how Red Bull dealt with that. But anyway, Isaac Hadjar, Yuki Tsunoda. I'm predicting again, only one of them is going to be there after the end of the season. It's going to be interesting who it is, but Yuki Tsunoda has got the fight of his life to stay in Formula 1 because it's quite clear that Red Bull don't have enough faith in them to take him to the big team, which is kind of sad, really. So Isaac Hadjar, as I said, initially got absolutely nothing to lose. This guy has everything to lose in a way, even though both him and Sainz have multi-year contracts with Williams. But we're really going to see now how good Alex Albon. He dominated his last teammate, Logan Sargent. But Logan Sargent wasn't that good. Wasn't particularly good, was he? When he went up against Colapinto, who no one thought would be as good as he was, he started. That's when the pressure seemed to be on. That's when Alex Albon started to make mistakes. Yes, he made that silly mistake in Australia, fair enough. But then towards the end of the year, that's when he started to make mistakes, get out qualified. You heard him for the first few times for a while, getting a bit, I don't want to say spicy, but sounding concerned on the team radio during the races. So again, it's going to be really, really interesting to see Alex Albon versus Carlos Sainz. Yes, for the man that got kicked out of Ferrari. He said he understands, had it been any other driver other than Hamilton, he'd be a bit annoyed. But Williams, the fastest in testing. We can't ignore that. Yes, I don't think it was a glory run, but I do think it was a run on low fuel and better tyres. Having said that, a lot of people are suggesting Williams could be best of the rest along with Alpine, and that is one of the most intriguing things for me. I absolutely cannot wait to see, because it's obvious that Williams have improved. It's just a question of how much has Williams improved, and for me, I absolutely can't wait to see how much Williams have improved for the 2025 season and where they're going to finish. Could they get the odd podium? I think James Vowles has come out. Even Carlos Sainz has suggested no to podiums. But we all know you're going over the course of the season. There's many races now, isn't there? There's a lot of races. We have 24 rounds, so surely over the course of the season we're going to have at least one or two of those crazy races where things happen, mistakes happen, and some of the midfield teams end up just doing a better job, either with strategy, car setup, pitching at the right time, a safety car messes things up for the people, and potentially getting on that podium. I think that is exactly what Williams can do, and I think the whole world will rejoice when they get their podium. And hey, as I saw from F175, James Vowles is he is most certainly one of the most popular team bosses going, which is absolutely, it can only be a good thing for Formula One. But there we go. So that's pretty much our drivers. That is all our drivers. If you want to subscribe, please do give us a subscribe. Just watching this video is more than enough for us. But if you want to do it a bit more, hit that subscribe button. If you're not, like the video, that always helps us out. Comment below, let us know who you think are the favourites going into the 2025 season in Australia. At the time of recording, it'll be all done in just under 2 weeks' time. But as I always say, until then, we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much for watching, but above all else, stay safe.